Did you know that the Pop Culture Preservation Society depends on support from listeners like you to keep our podcast up and running? We are an independent operation, creating, producing, distributing, and promoting the podcast by ourselves and paying for it out of our own pockets because we love it and we think it's worth it to preserve the well-loved cultural nuggets from our Gen X youth. If you'd like to become a supporter of the PCPS, go to patreon.com, Patreon, and search for Pop Culture Preservation Society. Our Patreon supporters are like our pit crew, giving us the fuel we need to keep on trucking. And as a Patreon supporter, you'll also get special thank you gifts, like video recordings of our episodes, after the episode discussions, invitations to live events over Zoom, and the occasional blooper delivered straight to your inbox. Thank you so much for listening and for being a part of our society. Hello, listeners. Do you guys remember when Mork was on Happy Days or when Charlie's Angels sailed on the Love Boat? Today, the PCPS will be on its own crisscross adventure with the hit podcast Dear Nina, Conversations About Friendship. Listeners send us questions about our friendship almost as often as we get Gen X pop culture questions. And it's clear that people want this to be real, this friendship that we have, as if three women holding each other with care is a help to them in their daily lives. And what most people are surprised to hear is that our friendship didn't begin until we were in our 50s.
Listeners, it is very real, but yeah, we only met a little over 4 years ago, like 4.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Women of a certain age.
Totally. And I just love that our platform lends itself to me feeling now that I've known you almost my whole life. Like I can picture, Kristen in her bedroom, listening to Andy Gibb and staring at her Tiger Beats and Sean Cassidy. The nature of our friendship is just so cool in that so much of our conversations are about when we were younger and, all those things that we have used to kind of bond with our listeners as well.
I think this is what people are responding to because it seems like we have been friends since childhood because we're talking about these childhood experiences that we shared. We just shared them without knowing each other, which is kind of what we're doing with our listeners. But that sharing is what helped us find each other in our 50s and bonds us together in our 50s.
Absolutely. And listeners, I got to tell you, it's a great way to meet and make friends. You can start talking about Donny Osmond, and if the person's eyes glaze over and they walk away, maybe that's not going to be, a forever buddy. But if they get super excited and start singing, I'm a little bit country, I'm a little bit rock and roll, friends. You're off to the races. Yeah. So, you can use these experiences and our nostalgia and our memories truly just for conversation starters and to help make friends. And wow, you bond instantly when you both had posters of Andy Gibb on your
It's almost a
wall.
litmus test. Will we have anything to bond over?
Right. And being in our 50s, I feel like we've got the confidence to go, you don't know who Donny Osmond is? You can't sing that song? I'm going to go move along. Where maybe middle school Carolyn would have just been like, oh yeah, Donny Osmond, he is a loser. I would have gone, but now I'm like, I don't have time for you.
Right. We won't laugh at the same jokes.
Right.
And if you can't laugh at the same jokes, and if you don't get excited over the same things, why are we spending time together?
I know. And we're brave enough now. I think women in our 50s, we're so empowered, right? And we're brave and we're strong. And like you said, Carolyn, about that, I don't have time for that. That's truly what it is.
This idea of us finding each other in our 50s and becoming close in the way that we are was of particular interest to our friend Nina Badson, the host of Dear Nina, Conversations About Friendship. She also happens to be the facilitator of our writing group, which is the place where we met. So Nina is an important part of our friendship story. Nina answers friendship questions from her anonymous listeners, and making new friends later in life is a recurring theme. She hears this from people all the time. It's very difficult for people to find new friends. So she graciously invited us to be guests on Dear Nina to talk about making friends after 50. And as usual, we had a lot to say.
Oh, really? Did we?
Yeah.
I kind of
that
felt
doesn't
bad.
sound like us.
I know. Well, now, because since I'm the editor of our podcast and I know Nina edits hers, I was so cautious of, oh gosh, because we do talk a lot, and I was trying
to edit a lot.
Yes, I was trying to be mindful of that, realizing that Nina's going to have to edit all of our chit chat, and not me. So we do talk a lot, but we had a lot of fun things to say. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, we worked very hard to be succinct.
We did. We practiced being succinct.
We came prepared.
Yes.
We self-edited like crazy.
That's right. So we always say it may have started with Little House and Love Boat, but the truth is that meaningful friendships can be made at any time in our lives. You just have to be looking in the right places for the right things. So please join us for a conversation highlighting our own friendship story and how we think you can replicate that in your own lives.
So please enjoy this episode of the PCPS Chatting with Dear Nina, Conversations about Friendship.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant.
As we get older, we kind of have that mentality of, I'm not going to really care what people think. I'm going to be more open to things. And it's still hard and it's still scary. But I think that's key.
Welcome to another episode of Dear Nina, Conversations about Friendship. I'm your host, Nina Badson. Today, I have 3 guests to address a friendship issue I get many emails about from listeners and readers in their 40s, 50s, and beyond who feel stuck in a rut with their friendships. People who feel they want to make new friends, but they say it's too late or it's too hard, it's too intimidating, and they just don't know where to start. I believe it's never too late to make new friends, which is why I invited Carolyn, Kristen, and Michelle, the hosts of the Pop Culture Preservation Society podcast, to tell us how they became good friends in only the last handful of years, what these new friendships have meant to them in a new stage of life, and what advice they have for others who want to bring new people into their orbits. Before I let them say hi and tell us their story, though, I want all my listeners to know that the Pop Culture Preservation Society is a podcast dedicated to preserving the pop culture nuggets of our Gen X childhoods. Carolyn, Kristen, and Michelle do deep dives into topics such as Barry Manilow, Tiger Beat, The Blue Lagoon, The Love Boat, Solid Gold, Saturday Night Fever, and more. They do extensive research, and their friendship really shines through on the podcast. And I know them. We all live in Minneapolis, and the fact that I know them, I think, might factor into their friendship story. I expect it to. If not, I'm going to demand some credit, and I'm going to let you hear directly from them. Hi, ladies.
Hey, Nina.
Nina.
Hey.
I've never done an interview, you guys, with 3 people, but I know it's something you're used to because you have really cool guests on your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So you're used to having several people on your screen. Where I want to start is tell me what it was like meeting new people, how you met. And I know you guys have probably thought about how you want to tell your story. So I'm just going to hand it to you.
Well, I think I've cracked the code. Let's just get to the end of the podcast right now. I think I cracked the code because my friendship with Carolyn and Michelle is a good example of how finding important people in your 50s differs from what it's like in your teens and your 20s and maybe even your 30s. It seems like when you're in your teens and your 20s, so much of finding friends is dependent on fun, or it circulates around fun. It's around social events, socializing. You find people who maybe have the same kind of sense of humor. You laugh over the same things. You like to do the same things and go to the same places. But when you're in your 50s, that changes dramatically. I can't go to a party anymore and have a conversation with somebody and go, oh, I really vibed on her. I'm going to ask her out for coffee. That doesn't happen. It's too loud. I'm irritated. I want to go home. I want to watch TV in my jammies. So
I always talk about things being too loud. I like
too
can't
loud.
the noise. Yes.
How do you get close to somebody when it's too loud?
Mhm.
What happens in your 50s, at least this is what has happened for me in my experience, is that you find important people by doing things that are important to you, and you find people who care about something. So the perfect example is the writing group that Nina started 6
Which
years
I
ago.
didn't even mention in the intro because I was hoping
That's
one of
right.
you would pat me on the back.
Gosh, yes.
Yes, because what happened with that writing group is, and these guys can speak for themselves, I joined that writing group not to find people, not to make friends, but to do something important for myself. And in that writing group, we share things, we share our writing. It gets very personal, very fast, and you get very close to people. And so our podcast grew out of that writing group. That was the foundation of it because we already knew each other's personal lives. Whether or not we had done anything outside of writing group, we had already cried in front of each other, essentially. That has been replicated in other parts of my life. It's when I've joined something. Here's another good example. At my kids' school, there were budget cuts and they closed the library. And so a group of parents were like, this is not acceptable. And over 5 years' time, some outraged people came together and created a library from scratch. And those people are now really important part of my circle. And I didn't find them until I was like 48 years old.
If you care about something with the same people, it would make sense that it would bridge to a friendship. I do want to stop for a moment to say that the writing group that Kristen is referring to is housed at Modern Well. And the groups were co-founded with Julie Burton. We created these writing groups together. And when we created them, we also were new friends. It's like a friendship story that begets a friendship story. We had really just met and been introduced because we were both writers. We both had 4 kids and we're about 10 years apart. We became close and she came up with this idea, like, do you want to start writing groups? We didn't know if it would just be a one-time thing. We created something that lasted about 8 weeks. And then a lot of the people signed up again. So we started a second day for more people to come, and people from that group have become friends too. And well, so let's hear a little more. So you met Michelle and Carolyn by signing up for something that you were doing really for you. It wasn't
For me.
necessarily to make friends.
And it was the point that I'm really trying to make is that this was something very meaningful to me. This was not for fun. This was something that was very important to me. And the other people who showed up, it was important to them. So it's
Yes.
kind of like this mentality of being in the trenches together. And that's where my relationships are growing from right now, is people that I meet in the trenches, not in a social situation.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And I want to add, my 40s and 50s, one of the gifts of aging, so to speak, is my willingness to take some chances and to step outside of my comfort zone and do things that might make me feel a little uncomfortable at first, but I kind of have a little bit more of motivation to do them. And so when I turned 50, I went to a writer's retreat in California and I didn't know a soul. And it was a pretty powerful experience. Fast forward a few months later after I'm home, I find out about the writing group that we were just talking about. And I thought, I'm going to go. I don't know anyone in this group, but I love to write. Obviously, they do too. That is something I did know. And so I went, and life has never been the same, you guys. To echo what Kristen said, yes, when you follow your heart, I mean, this thing that is speaking to you, saying, do this, and you take that chance, which again, I think is a gift that has come to me as I've gotten into my 40s and 50s. And I take these chances, and lo and behold, we're sitting here, the 3 of us, and we have a podcast. So it's, taking those chances has been a big part of why I'm here and why these women are my friends.
Carolyn, how far into our group did you come in? I know Michelle came in last, but it was already functioning when you signed up, right?
Yes.
So that's hard too. That takes some courage.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I turned 50 in 2015. Right. So it would have been maybe 2016 is when I joined the group. So I'm not sure. Did you guys start in 2015?
I think it was 2015.
We did, but like
So you-
fall of
Okay.
2015. So you weren't too far behind.
No, but still, that's intimidating. You don't know,
Yeah.
everybody knows the ropes. They know each other. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to remember everyone's names? And thank goodness in the beginning, we did have little name things
Yep.
that you had. But I'd write down like cute hair, Kristen.
Same.
Yeah, like likes, something.
That's so
And when
funny.
she said in the group that I said something about Earl Hamner from the Waltons, and Kristen's eyes just lit up. And she's like, you know who Earl Hamner is? So do I. And I
Who
was
knows who Earl Hamner is?
I know.
It's like just
I
the
don't.
2 of us. That's it.
He's the creator of the Waltons. And yeah, so those kind of moments led to this.
It is hard to believe that there was a time when people didn't know each other's names. And I remember I used to have everybody bring their name tag thing in, but then people would forget them. So finally, and this is so typical of me, right? Finally, I was like, no, you leave them here. I will bring them every time.
Yes, that is typical of me.
Teacher Nina. Yeah.
Nina's our mom.
And
Yes.
I'm going to actually, this is fitting that I'm going third
Mhm.
and piggybacking on what Kristen and Carolyn said, because I did take a really big chance for me to join this very established writing group 3 years ago in March. I can't believe it's only been 3 years ago, you guys. I feel
know.
like I've known you guys for so long. But despite some very ingrained new girl insecurities that I'd had for my whole life, I went to 9 schools in 12 years as a child. And when I joined the writing group, I had no idea it was such an established group. In fact, I can assure you, had I known, I never, ever would have come. But I did. And I quickly learned right away that everybody had been friends for like 3 or 4 years. Everybody knew each other's names, Carolyn.
Oh yeah, no more name tags. I don't think
No more
you're
name
probably done.
tags. No, I was making the same types of lists in my notebook. And then I can't believe I came back a second time. And when I did, everybody was in a different chair. and I around the
Oh,
table,
gosh.
and I was like, oh man, I had like written down everybody's names around, a little table drawing on my notebook. I felt so out of place. I was 50 years old, just 50. I was so out of place and so uncomfortable. I planned to quit every week, but I didn't. And why didn't I quit? One, the women were so lovely and kind and incredibly motivating with what they were accomplishing that I really felt like I had a need to surround myself with that energy, basically. And two, I felt an intrinsically personal connection with some of the people. I had immediately struck up kind of a karma-like friendship with Carolyn, like on day one, and very quickly felt a definite connection to Kristen just from listening to her read and just from the conversations like she and Carolyn were having or she and other people were having. But I was really hesitant to act on that one. Kristen, I think you scared me a little bit. Nina scared me a lot.
I do that. I'm so
Nina
you
scares
should see me.
I've told
I'm so
Nina that
scary.
before. And I remember, oh yeah, I love Nina so much. But man, Nina, that first, like those few months, I was like, it was like the scary teacher.
Well, I have to keep everyone in line.
But you do. But the thing is, you guys, is I knew these were my people, but I just didn't know how to break in still. And it's uncomfortable. It is
Yes,
so uncomfortable for about a
exactly.
year. I mean, I'm talking a year. It was uncomfortable. I was daring myself to go back, but I did. I kept going back. I kept coming back. And I am so grateful to myself for that, because now not only do I have this podcast and this incredible friendship with Carolyn and Kristen, I have other great friendships in the writing group. So I can't tell you how many times I'm thankful for all of the friends that I have there, the support that we have. It all comes down to taking a chance and taking a risk and being uncomfortable. I think that's something that is hard to do no matter how old you are. But
Yes.
I do think that as we get older, we kind of have that mentality of, I'm not going to really care what people think. I'm going to be more open to things. And it's still hard and it's still scary. But I think that's key.
Well, good segue to the next piece that takes some courage. There's the showing up to the thing, especially in the case of Carolyn at first and then Michelle, the thing that has already been ongoing and now people are getting to know each other. And Kristen, too, with some courage to, what is this thing? I mean, you were there like the very first day before it was
there day
even,
one. Mhm.
we talk about it like that's this special magical thing, but it wasn't special and magical on day one. It
Right.
got over time. And so you were there to help make it special and magical. But then there's liking someone and there's seeing them outside of class. Those are two separate things. Coming every week in a place where there's already on the schedule, nobody had to make the plan. Like Julie and I made the plan. We decided when you guys were coming to get together, right? And we would take these breaks and then we would sign up for a new session. And you always kind of know that you're going to see these people. It's taking it outside of the classroom, which turns it into casual, nice friends, people you really like to see, writing friends, we call each other probably. Then how do you get to that next step? I mean, my entire catalog of podcasts is really about this question, but I'd love to hear individual stories. So who made the first move?
Before we talk about the first move, I want to challenge you a little bit on that, taking it
Yeah.
to the next level or taking it outside of class, because there are plenty of people in the writing group that I don't see outside of class. I still consider them very close friends of mine because I know they have my back.
Oh, yeah. And we've had
Even-
intimate conversations.
Very much, very much. And so I want to encourage people that if you join something and you do something that's important to you, you can consider those times together when you're in the trenches as your friendship.
Oh,
You
for
can
sure, for
keep
sure.
it there if you want to. If there are some people that will want to take it further or do social things or do other things together. But there are many people in that group that I'm like, we are friends because I see you every Thursday and I cherish our time together.
I don't consider that a challenge, really, just because
Yeah.
I'm like the first to defend. You're talking about a real friendship, and
Mhm.
it is. But even if it weren't, even if it was like just a really nice acquaintanceship, I'm all about that too. I
Yeah.
think there's an important place in life, and it's a huge part of what we all missed in COVID. Now we all still were together on Zoom, which is great. But for people who didn't have a class that could be on Zoom, like, gosh, did people miss those
They
relationships?
really did. Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, back to this
Yeah.
particular friendship that did come outside the classroom.
Carolyn, do you want to tell her about our first date?
Yes, because of the Earl Hamner comment, I think I knew that Kristen and I shared some affinity to some of the fun things that were on TV or on the radio in the 70s. And when we heard that Mary Tyler Moore had passed away, that was a really emotional time here, obviously in Minneapolis for many reasons. And also for those of us who grew up with that as a staple of our weekend television watching with our families. And Mary obviously means a lot to the three of us, but one of the radio stations was doing a gathering where everyone was going to do the hat toss and we were going to sing the Mary Tyler Moore song. It was supposed to be outside. Weather was bad. It was in the IDS building. And I said to Kristen, like, I think we should go. I'd never seen her outside of writers group, but I just knew already that we had this shared love of Mary and this pop culture moment. So indeed, we went, and oh my gosh, you guys, there is nothing like singing that song together and then tossing your hat in the air. It was emotional. And I shared it with Kristen. So it just like elevated that friendship.
This was a really big jump. And I want to piggyback on the Mary Tyler Moore thing, because when we do this thing outside of class, this was not a social event. This was a meaningful event to both of us.
Yes.
Mary Tyler Moore had died and we were sad. And so, she stuck her neck out and she was like, do you want to be sad together? And we did. It was really emotional. So then a short time later, I noticed that this is so embarrassing. This is
it's
my
not.
job. It's not embarrassing. I'm just thinking of the people out there who don't live in our world. So I saw that my first boyfriend, Sean Cassidy, was going to be having a concert for the first time since 1979 at a tiny winery in California. This thing came over me like, I need to go. This is important. And so I took that information to writing group, because a lot of my writing has to do with childhood crushes or these popular culture things that Carolyn was talking about. And so I brought this to my writing group and I said, there's anybody out there who wants to go with me. Ha ha.
Were you planning to go alone?
Oh, hell
Kristen,
yeah. I was going
okay,
by
so that's
myself.
so cool. You were already going to go alone, but you said it in class.
Yes. This was, again, not a social event. This was something that was meaningful. And I put the invitation out there because I would like to go with somebody else, but I never in a million years imagined that anyone would say yes. And Carolyn said, I'm going with you.
Love it.
Yeah.
And so now we're traveling together and
Yeah.
we're
Oh, yeah.
sharing a hotel room together and driving to unknown places. This is not like downtown LA where you're going to get in an Uber. We had to rent a car and drive to some little town in Central California. Like, where the hell are we?
Right. It was a big jump. It's like we really took it to the next level. There is no better
Yeah.
way to become close friends with someone than to share a hotel room and bathroom and all of that.
And meanwhile, this is only a month after I've started writing group. So I'm still in that. I'm not coming back. I'm feeling very uncomfortable. Like I said, I had already clicked with Carolyn. I knew we had this big fangirling thing in common and this big love of the things from our childhood and entertainment, weekly and TV shows and award shows and Disney. And I mean, we had just struck up this great friendship in a very short time, contained at writing group. I was excited to see Carolyn when I'd go back to writing group because I hadn't had that type of a conversation with anyone else. And then, 3-4 weeks in, Kristen is saying, who wants to go see Sean Cassidy? And I pretty much had to sit on my hands.
Oh.
And, in hindsight, it's like, Michelle, why didn't you raise your hand and say, I'll go and take that chance? I was still spinning from the chance I had taken just to be sitting in that seat in writing group, that there was, again, my new girl insecurities. There was no way I was going to put myself out there even further and say, I'll travel across the country with you too. Because my first thought was that they would look at me and say, oh, that new girl's going to come. We don't want the new girl.
That's such a natural feeling. I'm glad you're sharing it.
I think over that summer, Carolyn and I maybe we met for lunch. I remember then, was it that summer that we went and saw Dax, you guys?
Oh, I
I think so. Carolyn, for those of you listening, Carolyn's boyfriend, her number one hall pass is Dax Shepard, and he was doing his Armchair Expert tour, and he was coming to Minneapolis. And Carolyn and I had enough of a friendship now that she knew that I was going to be all over this. So I remember you texted me, would you want to go? Let's get a group together. And I jumped on the ticket thing. I got the tickets first. And I was just so excited to be part of this group, to be part of this. And we went, and that's when I sat next to Nina. We all went to dinner first. And that was the first time that I was like, oh my God, she is not scary at all. She is lovely.
She's a real person.
Like I left like, wow, I really like Nina. Like that was, I had such a great conversation with her and she wasn't scaring me at all. I respected you. It was like an intimidation. You are in charge of that run group. You keep us all on our 2 minutes. So it was more like the teacher you respect, but you kind of are intimidated by. But yeah, so then the Dax Shepard thing happened. I think that had to have been before 2020. That had to have been
definitely.
2019. Yeah. And then once I got really comfortable in writing group, everything shut down and we went on Zoom.
And this is where the podcast is born, right?
Mhm.
Like you guys,
Kind of,
it's
yeah.
COVID times. Everyone's stuck at home. We're connecting on Zoom. What exactly was the seed to go from you guys have a lot of cultural references that you all like to actually creating a project around it?
Because Carolyn and I had taken this crazy trip to Sean Cassidy and came back and like basically did a book report on it for the group, Michelle got a job writing a piece about fangirling after 50. So who do you think she's going to call? She's going to call the people who jumped on a plane to go see Sean Cassidy.
Yes, perfect.
I wanted some quotes for my article to just make it a little bit more rich. And so I thought, I'm going to call Carolyn and Kristen Zoom. This was in, August of 2020.
Mhm.
I'm going to Zoom with Carolyn and Kristen just to pick their brains and get some good sound bites, basically. That conversation took on a life of its own. We Zoomed for maybe 2 hours. And did we even talk about the article? I don't know. We just quickly got into talking about the crushes, Tiger Beat, our childhoods. It went from then to toys we played with, shows we watched, things we loved. We had a really, really great conversation. It was so fun.
And all of those things are connected to us really, really personally. So it's not just that we're pop culture fiends, it's that there's a nostalgia within us that sort of connects us to our younger selves. And that younger self relates to who we are now, especially as 50-year-old women. We're much more in touch with our younger selves now than we were in our 30s, which is really very freeing. And so these conversations became very personal, very fast. It's not just like, don't you love Mary Tyler Moore? It relates to our families and our siblings and how and who we became today. And so I always say that the three of us became familial super fast because it's a concentrated version of our writing group where you reveal yourself on a daily basis. And that's how you become close.
Yeah, there's
Right.
vulnerability right away. And
Mhm.
Right. And being
Yeah.
seen. I think that was one of the neat things about that conversation and everything that's come since then. And I was so invigorated and excited at the end of that conversation. I said, you guys, we're going to start a podcast. And I don't even care if anyone listens. Like that, I was having so much fun and just learning so much. And that was kind of a little bit of the seed that I planted.
Another friendship question I have for the three of you in terms of becoming friends a little later in life is how do you find it has fit like these new friendships and not even just with each other, but maybe ones you have had with other people too? How does it mesh with the friends you already have, with your spouses? Have you met each other's kids? Like, let's talk about that a little bit, just how it fits into the rest of your life. Because sometimes that is an impediment to new friendship is it can get sort of stuck as a side thing that doesn't get integrated. It doesn't have to get integrated, but
Yeah, there's no side thing. I mean,
yeah.
that's another thing where I don't necessarily, I have my friends from the library, I have my friends from college, I have my friends in the neighborhood, I have my friends in writing group, I have my friends in my podcast. Because these aren't social things, because these are all things that are very personal to me, there's not a lot of mixing. There's no requirement for it to be mixing. Now, if I had a big birthday party and everyone's coming to celebrate me, or hello, book launch party, yeah,
Yes.
all those people would come together and they would all have a wonderful time and they would all love each other because they all love me. But that being said, no, I don't mix them.
Right.
All of them are personal in and of themselves. Even our husbands have met. We've met our children. We love each other's children. We love hearing stories about each other's children. But I said yesterday, this is my social life. When I see these guys on Zoom or in person, whether we're planning something, creating something, working on something, that is my social life. And so I don't need to take it anywhere else. There are no boundaries around it by any means, but that it flourishes where it is. And I love it the way it is.
And to your point too, Kristen, my other friends, it's a separate thing. I do have other friends, though, in other states that I've had for decades that listen to the podcast and that have said to me, I want to come sit in. I want to be friends with all of you. Like they've known me for decades, but now they feel like they know Kristen and Carolyn, either if that's just because of how we present ourselves on the podcast or because they've known me. And so by association, they feel like they know Kristen and Carolyn, who on the podcast sound like they know, so I think it's all inclusive. It's all are welcome here. It just happens to be the way that we all live our lives now. Everything is kept kind of separately.
One final question that kind of relates to something Michelle just said about friends being interested in the podcast. I'm just always curious about that, which is a little separate from the three of you becoming good friends. But do your other friends have interest in your podcast? I can ask myself the same question, by the way. And I have strong feelings and have written things about being careful to not expect friends to get on board with like every project you have going on. But what has the response been like?
I think the three of us too had a little, at least I did, trepidation of like, oh, please listen. There's that kind of awkwardness. So a lot of my friends have kind of found it in a way organically, like I'll put it on Instagram or whatever. And yeah, I've gotten some really neat comments and calls. And I also have to say for myself, as well as our listeners, we've heard from people reconnecting with old friends. Like we are bringing up a memory that somebody may have forgotten, or they remembered, oh, I did that with so-and-so. I wonder what she's up to or he's up to. And that's happened with me, especially with some high school friends. And that's been a really unexpected gift from this. Plus the new friends that we have made too, because we know in this community that we have this shared interest. And we had one listener who, talk about taking chances, flew to Chicago to meet up with us to go to a concert. And now he is a great friend and has helped us a lot. So the whole friendship thing in the podcast, it has a few different arms, and they've all been so life-giving and affirming to me. So I'm just super grateful for that opportunity.
And I'm really thinking about your advice, Nina, on this, because it's really holding true, where some of my friends are all in, waiting for that episode to drop every Monday. They listen to every single episode. And then I have some who are never going to listen. And some of that might be that they don't like podcasts. Some of them might not understand the degree to which I've jumped into this project. And maybe that's because I'm holding my cards a little close to my chest. Like Carolyn said, I'm not necessarily saying, hey, you got to listen to my podcast. It's all over the map, but I listen to you, Nina, and I do not take it personally. This is just the way it goes.
Yeah, and you'll have this with your book too. The advice I always give to people is, as long as friends are saying, how's it going? They don't have to listen to just say, oh, hey, how's the podcast going? How's the book going? When's the book coming out? It's not a promise to read it, review it, and buy 20 copies. And asking how are all of us could deal with this. It's asking how the podcast is going doesn't mean they have to specifically reference an episode, but it is nice to ask. And
And I have a friend who has been a friend of mine since we moved here. So like 20 something years ago, she now lives in New Jersey, but we connected over the same types of things that I connected with Carolyn and Kristen over. We immediately connected over award shows and movies and celebrities and everything. And her husband are just super close friends of my husband, and they listen to all the episodes. I will say something, though, that is probably, really honest for me to say here, but I know that there's probably people listening to this podcast on friendship that will relate to this. At 50 years old, I'm 53 now, but at 50 years old, when I joined Writing Group, and I had lived here for, at the time, 20 years, I didn't have a really large group of close friends. My close friends are the people I went to college with, and that's still just a handful of people I keep in touch with. This friend I'm just talking about, who now lives in New Jersey, but didn't even live here. I had a lot of acquaintances, a lot of people that I was good friends with when my kids were little and they were in dance class. So I was friends with those dance moms, and we would certainly do things together, or when they were in school. But when my kids grew up and graduated, they weren't people that I really stayed close with. I don't know. Is that because I do like to stay at home more? Is it because we didn't have a lot in common? I don't know if it's the new girl insecurities I kept with me for so long that I always felt like I'm not going to ask anybody to go to lunch because everybody's going to say, why is she asking me to go to lunch? So, at age 50, I didn't have a big group of close friends. The Writing Group changed all that. And again, coming full circle because I took a chance. And because there was something like that available. So, not to pander to you, Nina, but seriously, honestly, thank you. But thank you and Julie for creating something like that, because without that, my life would be wildly different right now.
And again, full circle, you weren't going to Writing Group because you needed friends, right? You were going there because this was something meaningful and important to you. It was about your own growth potential.
Oh,
and this 100%. Is the result. Right.
Yes. At the time, I was heavily into my freelance writing. I thought this was a great idea. This is a great place to go and maybe try some new types of writing to get feedback from. And then even when I first started, I never thought I would be good friends with all of you. I just didn't. I just thought you guys have been friends for too long. I'm always going to be the new girl. No one's ever going to include me in anything. And it very quickly, though, changed.
I'm so glad you brought up just the really honest feeling, which is really the context of this entire episode, of feeling like you didn't have a lot of good friends at that time. And that's sort of my message, is that it's never too late.
Exactly.
And I like, Kristen's point from the beginning to be thinking about the things that mean something to you that you enjoy and want to do. It can have a side benefit of making friends and probably will, but it can also be a valuable activity just because you're doing something for yourself. And oftentimes being true to your own interests or trying something for you could result in things you don't even know.
Mhm.
I want to share a quote from a friend of mine, a newer friend of mine actually, who I spoke to her about this episode before we recorded, and she's probably 5 years older than I am, and a little closer to your age, you guys. You know, I always laugh that like I'm the scary one, quote
She's the
unquote,
baby.
but I'm the baby.
Mhm.
She and I are newer friends, and we've gotten pretty close, and she actually lives not here, so it's a phone conversations we have. And I said, tell me about, how it is for you making new friends at this stage. And she said something so well. I said, oh, let me write that down. She said, I enter friendships differently at this stage of life. I don't want friendships that force me to suppress who I am. I don't want any pretending. This is me. You get what you get. A friendship is an investment of time. If I'm going to take the time, it's going to be with my full self. And I want the same from a new friend. And that's what I think I've seen with the three of you.
Mhm.
I think I see it in our writing group, and everybody's really 40 something plus, probably I might be the youngest. I'm 45. So, I mean, people are just at these stages of, I think she said it really well. Like,
Yeah,
we're different
that was
than when you're
beautiful.
sitting
It's so
with the dance
perfect.
moms.
And
Yeah.
you know
You're
what,
yourself.
Nina,
Mhm.
it's like I told Carolyn and Kristen this once, right? Very quickly after we started the podcast and meeting together all the time, we just became like soul sisters. And I said to them, I love our friendship so much because for the first time in my whole life, I don't leave a conversation saying, oh, you're driving home, or after you turn off the Zoom or whatever, or leave lunch, you're going, Michelle, why did you say that? Or, you talk too much, or, you're second guessing everything you said. And it was not the first time, because I certainly have that small handful of friends that I feel truly myself with. But most of the friends I'd had in my adult life, I always walked away feeling insecure. And it was the first time that I didn't. And then as time went on, that's how I feel with everyone in writing group too. And so what your friend said is so important. You start to find friends that you can shed your insecurities with, and that's everything.
And that means that you change the things that you do with those friends as well. I was having a conversation with a friend recently who was really, and she's a little bit younger, and she was actually quite overburdened with her social life and the getting dressed up and the drying of the hair and the going to the fancy reservation and this, that, and the other thing. And I said, I just don't do that anymore. And she said, well, what do you do with your friends? I said, I do things that don't require me to brush my hair.
I love that.
That's what I'm doing. I'm meeting people for coffee. I'm going for walks. We're just getting together to look each other in the face and say, how are you doing? I know things were really tough last week. Is it getting any better? And I don't have to brush my hair. I'm showing up as my real self 100% of the time. Not that I don't ever brush my hair.
But not to say we don't have fun. We have a lot of
do,
fun.
yes.
We do fun things.
Yeah.
I know you do. Are you guys ready for the better friendship goal of the week?
Let's do it.
Ooh,
Oh,
yes.
And it's really not for you three because you've already done this, but it's for our listeners. Advice that would have helped Michelle when she first came to the writing group. It's really good advice, I think. You worked through it, so you did a great job. But there's a psychologist and friendship researcher named Marissa Franco. If there's an article about friendship out there, she's quoted in it. In her research, she has seen that people who show up assuming that others are going to like them do a better job making friends. If you show up with the assumption these people are going to like me, it just makes you act friendlier. It makes you naturally put a smile on your face, because the opposite is also true. If you walk into a situation assuming that people aren't going to like you, you act a little bit shut off. Maybe you cross your arms, maybe you're not smiling, and people read off of our body language. So the goal of the week is, if you're going to show up to something new where you might make a new friend, or even if you're just coming to something like our writing class, let's say, where it's because you're interested in it, it's not necessarily to make new friends, you still might have that benefit of making new friends if you come with the assumption that people like you. Let's assume people like us.
Yeah.
Ladies, I am so grateful that we got to see each other, and our class has been on break for a while, so I miss seeing your faces. I can't wait for more people to just get to bask in your friendship and hear about, how I was helpful to get you together. I always like to get constant
It
accolades
is, yes.
and credit.
You're one of our fairy godmothers.
That's right.
Nina.
Yes.
So everybody go find the Pop Culture Preservation Society podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then you can discover all three of our ladies, Michelle and Kristen and Carolyn, who all have interesting things going on and social media accounts. And you will find that all on ninabadzin.com, where I keep my show notes. And as I always say, if you have time to rate and review the show, that would be wonderful, but only if you liked it. I copied that from Glennon. I don't know if you guys have heard me say that. I copied that from Glennon. Glennon always says, if you didn't, that's okay. Thanks anyway.
Keep on moving.
And come back in a couple weeks when our friendships are going well. We are happier all around.